today we really talked about Native Americans big picture, and then kind of zoomed in on the Spanish coming into America, specifically with the Spanish doing the Incomida system. First having natives as slaves and then employing the African slave trade. And then we saw that the Spanish are going to get a huge chunk of North and South America according to that Treaty of Tordesillas. But just because the Pope drew a line on the map doesn't mean that all the other countries in Europe are going to say, oh, well, that belongs to Spain. We won't even go over there. The French are into North America too. So French exploration, very different from the Spanish. And so the French will follow Spain. Spain, of course, leads the way with Christopher Columbus. And the Spanish are going to start bringing back to Europe boatloads of gold and silver. Literal boatloads of gold and silver.
Wait, the Spanish?
The Spanish.
Oh, okay.
And the Spanish are becoming very wealthy, very powerful, and all those other countries in Europe are thinking, yeah, we need to get some of that. So the French are going to follow up on the success of the Spanish, and the French are going to start exploration in the New World. Now the French are not stupid. They pick a totally different part to go explore. So Spain, they're down in Florida and south, right? What's now Florida, the Caribbean, Mexico, and south. So France, they head up around what's now Canada. Okay, way far away from the Spanish because they don't want the Spanish beating up on them. Specifically, they are exploring the St. Lawrence River, which is now the area of Quebec. And they will start making money on their own, but not by bringing home boatloads of silver and gold. They engage in trade with the Native Americans, specifically the fur trade. And they are much, 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 much friendlier to the natives. The Spanish was convert or die. The French were like, hey, we'll give you this if you show us that. And then we'll leave. And it was a friendlier, very much more of a business type relationship between the Indians and the French. Now, besides making money, and of course that's everybody's goal here, is to make money, the Spanish would also say they were trying to, win people to Christ, save souls, but also to find gold. So making money is always the number one thing, and the French, they are engaging in the fur trade, but they also want to find the Northwest Passage. The Northwest Passage is the idea that there is a water route around the North American continent.
Wait, around.
Like, this is Canada. You got the Atlantic Ocean. They're French, they are exploring, trying to find a water route to go around America to get to Asia. They do not want to travel south, around South America to get to Asia because the Spanish will beat them up. Okay? So the French, they think there could be a North Passage around America to get to Asia, to do the trade, and to bring back the good stuff from Asia to make money that way. Now, as you can see on this map, There is a Northwest Passage. What's the problem? Why didn't they find it? It's very far north, so it's mostly ice covered all the time. Now, even now, it's ice covered. But, maybe in 5 years or so, there will be no ice. Who knows? Right? The way we're going at this point. But yeah, there is Northwest Passage, but they never found it because they always ran into the glaciers, into the ice, they couldn't get through. And plus, this is super north. The French were looking around like between us and Canada. And obviously you can go into here and go down the St. Lawrence River, but then eventually the St. Lawrence River ends. And you're stuck. Eventually they thought about the Great Lakes were the next ocean, but obviously they figured out not. So they were looking in the wrong place, but even if the French did look in the right place, it would have been frozen over anyway. All right, so Spain, France, and then the last one that we really care about actually is England. We'll talk about one more later, but it's not much. So England has desire to create an empire around the world, kind of like Spain is doing. And now the French, they're claiming territory in North America. The monarch at the time is Queen Elizabeth I. There she is. And she is going to be the one that will get England kicked off in these voyages of exploration. And she does this to try to solidify her place as the reigning monarch and to establish some power and some prestige. So there was a lot of political and religious turmoil in England at the time. She was a Protestant queen, but the Catholics wanted the throne back. They didn't want, they wanted another leader instead of Elizabeth, but she thought this could help her keep the throne. She is going to really employ this guy to do a lot of the work with the early English explorations, Sir Francis Drake. And he wasn't an explorer in the sense like Columbus, as much as he was a pirate. He basically scouted out, and of course it just wasn't him in his ship. It was him and a whole fleet. They basically went and scouted out to attack the Spanish and to steal from them. And eventually that is going to cause a war between the Spanish and the English. Now, the first bit of exploration that we're going to see from England in the Americas, we'll get to that in a bit, but we're going to finish this off here. So because the English are picking on the Spanish, we see a war, and the Spanish lose. It's kind of a really big deal. Everybody thought Spain was it. Everybody was scared of the Spanish, and the Spanish ships, and the Spanish Navy, and the Spanish ruled the world. That is until the defeat of the Spanish Armada. So this war was triggered by the English pirates attacking the Spanish ships. The King of Spain will send his armada. An armada is like a group of battleships. He is going to send them to the coast of England, defeat the English Navy, invade England, and take over England. That's the master plan here. And he said he's doing this because he's mad at the English pirates, but also because England was a Protestant country, and the Spanish king, he's trying to win souls to the Holy Catholic Church. So he wants to take over that Protestant country. Sir Francis Drake will lead the defense against the Spanish, and they got a bit of luck. Now, the English did not call it luck. They thanked God for being on their side. They said that today we know that God is a Protestant because God whipped up a huge storm that put the Spanish fleet in disarray because of the rough seas and the winds and things like that. And the English were able to destroy the Spanish armada. Tremendous English victory. And this is a quote, "God blew and they, the Spanish, were scattered, and the Protestant wind brought victory to England." So, the defeat of the Spanish Armada actually is a really big deal in America. It's a really big deal because it changes things. We're not scared of the Spanish as much anymore. The French, the English, even the Dutch are going to start setting up settlements and colonies in the America. And you're going to see a shift from a feudalism model that the Spanish established, meaning that the king gave particular chunks of territory in the New World to nobles. So the nobles owned all the land and all the property and all the Indians and eventually all the Africans that they brought over. And then those nobles were loyal to the king and paid a tax to the king. When we start seeing the French and the English and the Dutch coming to America, they do more of a capitalistic model, which means individuals or individual companies are going to go make profits for themselves. Because a lot of individuals could not afford to finance that trip, you do establish companies, and we're going to talk about the Virginia Company maybe today, maybe Monday. We'll see how far we get. So, these companies will finance settlements in America, and of course the goal is to find riches, hopefully gold, but something to make a profit off of what they find or what they do in America. Okay, I think that might be it. Are we good? Ooh, look at the gold. Yeah, they were looking for gold in places like Virginia and Massachusetts. No gold there. This sea lock. Yes. Yep. All right, Corbin, Ms. Vernon wants to see you after lunch.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Next little bit. Oh, this is the last one. So just to kind of recap and highlight here. Spain, the conquistadors were the first, as in the soldiers, the armies, conquering for Spain and the priests coming to convert. They had a tight control over the colony and territory that they took over. The natives had little freedom. A lot of times they were enslaved. And again, they were looking to convert the Indians to the Holy Catholic faith. And also they exploited the natives. They turned them into slaves. The French, it was different. The French French really didn't settle in the New World. They had trading posts. And yeah, there was somebody that usually was a permanent fixture at that trading post, but it's not like they were planting a whole new France in America. It was more of a business venture, and they were just there to get what they wanted, ship it back to France, make some money. The French got along with the Indians and made a bunch of trade alliances with the Indians. England, and of course we haven't talked about their settlements yet, that's what we're doing next. They're going to send folks over in droves to settle, to farm. And the English will start their own little, obviously their own little country over in America. But it starts with the English people living in America having more freedom than the English people living in England. And the English people living in America kind of governing themselves. And their attitude toward the natives was to stay back. Us English people, we take this part, you Indians, y'all can have that part, and let's not interact at all. The English didn't try to convert the Indians, but they also didn't try to make friends with them either, so just separation. All right, so that's kind of big picture of how the different European groups interact. Back to our learning target today, we are going to ACE the SAQ. All right, so, and you don't need to list this. This is just to just put it up here so we can go over it real quick. So the SAQ stands for short answer question. Short answer question. There are 3 SAQs that you have to answer on the exam. Overall, it's 40% of the score for the exam. 20%. You get 40 minutes to answer all 3 questions. Now, each SAQ has an A and a B and a C. Okay? So there's an A and a B and a C times 3. Make sense? So you're looking at 9 questions you have to answer in 40 minutes. And really you're going to do no more than about 3 sentences for each of those A's and B's and C's. So kind of 9 parts, about 3 sentences each. Does that mean 27 sentences? It'll be great. All right, here we go. All right, so 3 SAQs, 20% of the score, 40 minutes. So SAQ 1, you don't have a choice. They give you the question, you have to answer it. It is a secondary source stimulus, meaning like you had on your bell ringer. That was a secondary source. SAQ 1 is a primary source. The primary source stimulus, it could be like a little excerpt from a journal. It could be a newspaper clipping from that time period they're asking about. It could be a picture, whatever. SAQ 3 and 4, you choose which one of those 2 to answer. So you get to choose, hopefully, the one you know the most about. And then the stimulus, like I said, it's a document, it's a painting, it's a cartoon, something. All right, so how do we do this? You answer it very directly and very explicitly. Painfully explicit. Okay? I do not grade the APUSH test anymore. Now I go to Cincinnati in the summertime and grade the AP macro test. But I have graded the APUSH test in the past. And the teachers that are there grading those tests, we are expected, if I was on an SAQ, I would probably be expected to grade about I don't know, 450, 500 of those a day. So I have to read through these very quickly. So you're not writing poetry. You are answering the question directly and very explicitly, okay? You use the phraseology of the question. So if it said, how did the British colonists interact with the Native Americans? The British interacted with Native Americans by doing this, right? So that would be the phraseology of the question. Specific historical examples, terms, events, people. You ought to be using proper nouns. You ought to be using people. You ought to be using the words up on the wall with the vocabulary. You ought to be using like that stuff. 2 to 4 sentences for each response. You have 23 lines to write on for each question. And then each question has an A and a B and a C, and you ought to label your response A and B and C. All right, so how do you write it? You explain the relationships, the effect, the connections. You include the hows and whys, and then you synthesize, you put it all together. You do not just repeat the question. It's not an essay, it's 3 sentences. It's not a paragraph. It is an A, period, and a direct response. You don't do bullets, label it A, B, and C. Write in complete sentences, not fragments. And this goes with every response in APUSH. Okay? You never write the first person. You always just make the statement, make the argument. And do not quote a long segment of the document, if there is a document given to you. Okay, so ACE. This is those 3 sentences to answer each part of the question. A is answer. You provide a direct answer to the question. C is cite evidence. Cite evidence. This is where you use the vocabulary, okay, or the people, or the dates, or those proper nouns. And then expand how that evidence is directly connected to the answer. What else can you add to it to explain or provide more context? Okay, let's see what's going on here. So we're going to do, I have my own example. Here it is. Okay, this is double-sided, and we're going to start, one side looks like this, the other side looks like this. We're going to start with the really wordy side.